Hello, everyone. This is Bob Shin again, Beaver Bowler number one. So, what is BWSI? Special one in the class 34. Can you say it? All right. At least people are typing it in. So today we are just extremely lucky to have Dr. Ellie Niewood as the seminar speaker today. Now, I've known Ellie since 1993. Yeah, we worked together for many, many years. He joined the Lincoln Laboratory in 1993 after graduating, getting his PhD from MIT Aero Astro. I didn't actually know him when he was at MIT, but I started working with him when he first joined the laboratory. And he was we are both technical staff, and then Ellie became the leader of one of the groups, and then he actually became a program manager of one of the largest programs at the laboratory. And then he wanted to have a change of career, so he actually moved over to our engineering division. And then after a few years, he actually became the division head of our engineering division, which with over like 500 engineers. And then after that, then he left the laboratory and he was on a loan to the U.S. government, U.S. Air Force, as an IPA, Interdepartmental Personnel Act. And so basically, he's working for MIT, but he's on loan to the government, and he was a technical advisor to the Air Force Rapid Capabilities Office, and that was the same role I played before Ellie about 10 years ago. And then after that, then he came. He actually then joined MITRE. He was at MITRE for a number of years, and while he was at MITRE, he was a big supporter of BWSI. So the one of the reasons why we have three courses being led by MITRE staff this year. And then after a role as a vice president at MITRE, I think last year, he went back to the government, and his current role is that he's a director of the Department of the Air Force Integrated Capabilities Office in Washington, D.C. He's in D.C. now at the Pentagon, and he reports directly to the Secretary of the Air Force. So I think one thing I can say about Ellie, based on his background, but based on my working relations with him, he's probably the best broad systems thinker in this country, maybe in the world, right? And I think it's a combination of his technical background in Aero Astro, plus this very broad set of experiences. I think that made him just a big thinker. And I am just so grateful that he is where he is today, because he's going to make sure our Air Force and Department of Defense will make all the right decisions and we keep our country strong and safe. So with that introduction, Ellie, over to you.
Good. That's a high bar to set. I will say, try to help the Air Force make better decisions. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And one other comment I'll make on the intro. Bob talks says, "Lucky to have you here." It's not luck. Bob does a lot of hard work, to line up speakers. And also, I give a lot of credit to Bob and others at Lincoln and elsewhere. The reason why I can do this work is because of all the things I've learned over time from many people, Bob included. So I wanted to start with, title of this talk is, systems analysis of an engineer's career. I thought might be useful to talk a little bit about what does that even mean, systems analysis. And what came to mind to me is an example of what I think of as the opposite of systems analysis. So, as Bob mentioned, I work for the Secretary of the Air Force. We help inform decision making by senior leadership of the Air Force. And about 6 months ago, there was a really big decision that needed to be made, and the Secretary of the Air Force, asked a number of organizations to come together and really do analysis to get after and help inform his decision making. And I got to watch that happen. And I would say that the teams that were involved, there were many different people, many different organizations that contributed. They all worked together. I thought really well. They got stuff done in a very short time under a lot of pressure, and they did really, I'll say, high fidelity operational analysis, like incredibly impressive. The tools and the knowledge that they brought to bear. So all that very good. But when I look at, sort of what they had done, I believe that they answered the wrong question. And we had beautiful analysis, again, really hard work, but it didn't actually help make the decisions that we needed to make because they didn't get after the right things. And so I think a key part of system analysis, something I learned again, relatively early from, some of my mentors is what is the question you are set to answer? And understanding what questions matter, a key part of systems analysis. The other thing I'll say, and I'll tie that to the talk today, is another thing that I think really good systems analysis does is it's not about a number. Again, this work that was done, came up with numbers. This is 0.87 and this is 0.83. And I believe they did the work to really differentiate between 0.87 and 0.83. But that doesn't actually teach you anything, and you don't learn anything from that kind of fidelity. The best systems analysis, I always believe, when you're done, you look at it and you say, that is all obvious to me now in retrospect, and I wouldn't have thought of it before. So I think, what I'm going to go through with you today, hopefully you look back at it after the talk today and you say, oh, all those things that Ellie talked about, I should have thought of that myself. And that's obvious to me, but maybe you wouldn't have thought about it if I didn't bring it up. And so that's what I'm going to try and do is give you some insights. I think I have learned, looking back at my career, what has driven it, and try to hopefully be as insightful as one can about their own career as I go through that with you. So let me just pull up this chart, and so I will share. And here are, sort of my top 10, I would say, career lessons, hopefully providing some insight. So first one, how would you like to work on chaos? So when I was probably about the age of many of you in the room, I was a rising senior in high school. I don't think we even called it that at the time. I just finished my junior year, but essentially a rising senior. I grew up in New Jersey, and I went out to Los Angeles to go to USC and participate in a summer program there. 8-week summer program, take on a research project with the professor. And the very first evening you're there, you arrive on Sunday. Sunday evening, there's a reception for all of the students and for the faculty who they will be doing research projects for. And you don't know who your faculty is yet. You don't know what the project is. And I walk into the room, and this person starts walking up to me with hair going all over the place. It's a reception, so people are eating, and his food is sort of some of it made it into his mouth, some of it didn't. It's on his face, it's on his clothes. Not quite what I was used to from school. And he must have known who I was. Someone had pointed me out to him. And he comes up to me and he goes, Ellie, how would you like to work on chaos? And he was just so excited and so, emotional about what he was doing. And chaos, for those of you not following, not just that something is chaotic, it's actually a specific mathematical term, that has to do with sets of equations that what they evolve to over time, highly dependent on the initial conditions that are set for them. So you think about the weather. People often think of the weather as chaotic. It can turn out very differently based on small things that drive it. And I had no idea what chaos was. He was an aerospace engineering professor. I didn't really know what aerospace engineering was. I didn't know if I was interested in it. But his fervor, his excitement about the work was just incredibly motivating to me and carried over to me. And it really made me excited about it. And it really made me think about how important it was to be excited about the work that you are doing. And so, I think all of you, thinking about, where to go to school next, where to go to university, what to major in, what to spend your time on. I think there's an incredibly important lesson there in terms of finding something you are excited to do. I often, say, I've told this to people, who work for me. I want people, to want to come to work in the morning, and I want them to want to go home at the end of the day, right? I think it's incredibly important that you have life outside of your work and you have people, you are connected to and things you like to do. But I think it's also important that when you get up in the morning and it's time to, drive in or make the commute or take the, public transportation, you are excited to get to work on the things that you get to work on. Um, I know people in other fields, and some of them don't have that excitement, and you can see the impact. Not just on their work. I see that less, but you see the impact on their lives and what it means. I don't like to pick on lawyers. I actually have a son-in-law who's a lawyer who loves his work. And it's actually been great for our family because we never had a lawyer in the family, and now we have someone we can go to with all these questions. And he's an estate lawyer, does income tax law, so we go to him with all those questions. But I know too many lawyers who it's just a job and they don't enjoy it and they don't not excited about what they do, and you can see the impact that it has on them. And so, the first of those career lessons, I wanted to impart to you all is find something you love that you can work on. And you may not know what it is at first. You may have to try different things. I remember when I got to MIT, I thought I was really interested in philosophy, and so one of the first classes I signed up for was a philosophy class, and I could not stay awake through the class. I fell asleep every time I got there, and I realized maybe this is not for me. So that's the first of those career lessons. What I'll do is I'll go through a couple of these and then pause for questions, and then also I'll leave some time for questions at the end. So second career lesson, that was shocking. And so, mentioned that I went to the summer program at USC between my junior and senior years of high school. I don't know if folks can see it on the camera view, but, I wear a yarmulke. I'm an Orthodox Jew. And so, as I'm going off to this program at USC, one of the challenges for me is I only eat kosher food. There's no kosher dining hall at USC, at least not during the summer back then. So, what am I going to eat during the summer while I'm there? So, my parents, very resourceful, and they buy me a toaster oven, and I'll go shopping in the Jewish areas of LA on Sundays, and then bring stuff back, have it in the room that I'm staying in at the dorm at USC, and be able to cook it in this little toaster oven. Not a full kitchen or by any means, but at least I could do something. So they packaged the toaster oven up, put it under the, check it as luggage underneath the plane. I get to the, airport in LA, pick it up, bring it to the dorm room, and go to, cook, really stick in the oven and defrost basically my meal that first night, and the toaster oven doesn't work. And I don't know, I unplug it, I plug it back in, still doesn't work. We had an RA, someone who was essentially, watching over these high school students while they lived in this college dorm, helping us with things. I go to him and say, what do I do? The toaster oven doesn't work. So he comes to the dorm room with me. He brings his pocket knife. This is in a day when, appliances were much simpler. He's like, okay, let's open it up and let's see. So he unscrews it. He says, be very careful. Before we open it up, we're going to unplug the toaster oven. We're not going to do anything, touch it when it's not when it's plugged in. So he opens it up, and sure enough, there's a wire there that's loose. And I think he's trying to teach me a lesson how to take care of myself. He says, "I'll leave you the pocket knife. You just need to attach that loose wire to this screw, close it back up, plug it back in, and it should work." So I do what he says. He leaves. I put the wire back on. I put tighten the screw up. I close the toaster oven, plug it back in, and it doesn't work. I unplug it. I open it back up again, and the wire has come loose, from the post while I'm screwing it back on and closing it back up. And I repeat that process probably about 5 times. I think I've got it on there. I still don't have it. Turns out I don't. And so I go through it again. I close the toaster oven, I plug it in, I try it, it doesn't work. I open it back up. I go to put the wire back on the post. Those of you who've been listening carefully will notice that I forgot a step. I did not unplug it. I go to touch the screwdriver to the post, get a giant shock through my hand through the knife. Fortunately, not really hurt. And now I would say, very honestly, I'm practically in tears because this is the way I'm going to eat for the summer. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I figure, whatever, I close it back up, I plug it back in, and lo and behold, it works. So what happened? When the shock went through the screw and the post, it basically soldered the wire back onto the post, so it didn't come loose anymore. And I was able to then use that oven for the rest of the summer. Bob mentioned some of the transitions I've had in my career. One that I remember strongly is I worked at the same group as Bob doing systems analysis, modeling things on a computer. When I was an undergraduate at MIT, all undergraduates in ARS or all juniors took essentially a year-long project class. And the first part of the project class, they brought us to the machine shop and they taught us how to use the machine tools so we could use them for our project. And at the end of the week, the instructors, the people who ran the machine shop, came to me and they said, Ellie, whatever you need done in the shop, you don't need to do it. We will do it for you. Why? They weren't being nice. It wasn't like I had earned their favor. They knew that if I had to use the machine tools, either the tools or I would be broken by the end of the day. Maybe both. I'm not a hands-on person. I'm not good with tools. I don't do those things well. And so I'm in this group doing systems analysis. An opening comes up to actually go to the group that I think Joel was in at the time, doing field and flight testing, all about building systems, experimenting with them hands-on. And I took the job in that group. It was a big leap for me, working with people and leading people who were doing work that I didn't know how to do. It was scary. I did not know if I would succeed. But it was incredibly, I think I gave to that group. I know I learned a lot from them, and I think it helped me in my career and helped in a great way. Bob mentioned, I left MITRE 9 months ago now to join the government. We lived in Newton, Massachusetts at the time, needed to move here to the DC area to take this job. I left a vice president role at MITRE. I was an officer of the company. I was making good money. I was very comfortable in the role that I was in. I think I was good at it, and I knew every day what I was doing. I wasn't worried that I was going to fail. And I joined the government in October, a month before an election for a boss that I knew was likely not to be there one way or another 3 months afterwards. So I figured he had about a 25% chance of staying. The election could have gone either way, 50-50, and even if his party had won the election, there was a good 50-50 chance they would bring someone else to take his job. We sold the house we had lived in for 30 years, left the community, my kids grew up in and where we knew people, moved somewhere new, bought a new house, took a new job. Even now, it's still a little bit scary. I don't know if I will be successful in this role or not. I have a new boss. I have learned a huge amount in my time here. Even if this job ends tomorrow, it will have been worth every minute of it. And so, my lesson to all of you, or what I would try to impart to all of you, is you will face multiple branch points in your careers. You will have a choice between doing something that is comfortable and doing something that you aren't sure if you'll succeed or not, that will challenge you. I think when you face those choices, I would advocate always do that thing that is challenging. Don't do something like if you know you're going to fail and not up your alley at all, but push yourself. Take a leap of faith. Trust that you will rise to that occasion and get after that. I'll do one more and then I'll pause for questions. Uh, I'm a grandfather now. I actually have four grandchildren. The first one was born right in the middle of COVID, so doing more work from home. And she came to visit us with her parents. Obviously, too young to do that by herself. She was probably about a year old, so she's walking, she's talking a little bit. But I'm working from home. My wife had taken the day off, so she was babysitting her. She was playing with her in the living room, and I'm sitting in the dining room. And I'm on a call, and the call is about nuclear command control and communications, what we call NC3. And I don't think we actually solve the NC3 problem, but we're talking about things that really matter. And so Gwen walks into the room, and she's trying to get my attention. She wants me to come play, and my wife says, "Gwen, don't cry, Grandpa's keeping the world safe for democracy." And my wife said it, I think, half in jest, half seriously, because the reality is NC3 is important to the safety of the world. And the work we were doing, one very small part of it, may be successful, maybe not, but that meeting was about things that really matter and really make a difference. And so, look, I think it's important, as I said earlier, to find something that you love to work on. I think it's also important to find something that you think is important and matters. When I was a graduate student, in graduate school, I studied electric propulsion for spacecraft. I studied a technology called magnetoplasma dynamics, which you basically need a nuclear reactor on your spacecraft in order to be able to use an MPD thruster. And I went to a conference in Viareggio, Italy, probably one of the most fun conferences I've ever been to, on the seaside in Tuscany. We took a day trip to Pisa. We took a day trip to a castle in Tuscan hills. And after the conference was over, I went to Florence for the weekend. Conference was incredibly fun. I'm giving a talk at the conference, and I know that no one in that room could ask me a question that I am not equipped to answer, because I am an expert in this field. But I also know that only the 20 people in that room cared enough to ask me a question. And it didn't really matter what we were doing to anyone else out there. And that was part of when I started to think about what is it that I'm going to do with my career. I loved that work. It was a huge amount of fun. It wasn't going to have the impact that I was looking to have with my career. And so I think it's something that you want to think about. What can you do that you believe, you know, even if your contributions start small and it takes time for them to grow, but at least you're working on something that you think is important. So let me pause there. If people have questions, happy to take a question or two before I go on.
We'll open up to questions in the room first. So if you guys have any questions, can you raise your hand? All right, looks like we currently don't have any questions in the room. Jeanette, can you check and see if there's any virtual questions?
Yes. I see Horton Zoo.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your talk so far. I had a quick question. So it sounded like a lot to me that you always knew you were pretty focused in the STEM area. Like you even went to the USC summer program when you were a rising senior, right? But then after
Yeah.
that, it sounded like to me you bounced a lot through different areas. And I was wondering, like, what factors did you use to make that final decision and like figure out what you want to do?
Yeah, so look, I've always been in STEM. I mean, I'm an engineer. I think of myself as an engineer. When someone asks me what I do, either say I'm an aerospace engineer or I say I'm a rocket scientist. At some level, it defines me. And I do management, I lead people, but I do it always from an engineering perspective. I think I learned, I went to that program at USC partly to see if would enjoy engineering. I left it knowing that I loved engineering. I don't think everyone will have that revelation as early in their career. I think I was lucky somewhat, to find that. I think you have to try things until one of them really bites you, and you walk away saying, I love this. My wife is a scientist, I'm an engineer. Our kids sort of pushed back on that for a while. And, I'm helping my son with his physics homework, one day, and he comes to the dinner table and he says, I really love physics. This is really fun. And we're like, of course, this is genetic. You cannot escape this. I will say the opposite, that my daughter went to visit MIT while my son was there to see if she wanted to go to school there. And at the time I worked at Lincoln, and so part of MIT. So if your kids go to MIT, their tuition would be paid by MIT, which is a huge benefit, obviously. And my daughter comes home from the weekend at MIT, and don't want to pressure her, but ask her, how was it? And she goes, Dad, I got all the jokes, but I didn't laugh. And I knew, like, okay, this wasn't for her. So I think you just have to try things, and it won't be may not be the first thing, may not be the second thing, and may take time to find that. But I think hopefully at some point you find something, and it really, that it is clicked.
All right, thank you.
Great, maybe time for one more.
Jeanette, it looks like there's a couple more online. Can you please select someone?
Yeah. So I
Sure.
see Soraya.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. So let's say you have been doing a lot of work, I mean, for your passion. Let's say you got a degree, I mean, especially with research and all that, but you find something else more fascinating. I mean, would you encourage, I mean, exploring that and kind of exploring as many things as you can?
Yeah, I think especially early in your career, you have time to explore things, right? It's actually a little harder when you're further along. The opportunities, they're great opportunities, but they're few and further between. I think early in your careers is when you have the time to try different things and take a chance, see something. You don't want to switch every 2 months, right? You want to learn something, you want to get something out of each experience that you have, but don't be afraid to try different things.
Thank you.
Great. Maybe we'll go on, and then I'll take more questions at the end, if that's okay. Chocolate fingerprints everywhere. So I'm a new staff person at Lincoln, and back then we didn't project things like I'm doing right now electronically. We actually put things. We call them view graphs. They were plastic sheets that your chart or your presentation was printed on each sheet, and you put it on essentially a big light bulb, and it projects onto a screen. And I'm giving my first talk for the government. So I'm going to travel down to DC, really excited about this, feel pressure. And you can't just print the view graphs the morning of your talk, right? You've got to send them to the publications department, and they print them for you. And so, you've got them like a week before. And so I practiced that talk. I practiced every day. I practiced in the morning. I practiced after lunch. I practiced later in the afternoon. I get to Washington. We go to the Air Force office, there's the Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and the Major and my boss and his boss all in the room. And we put the first view graph down on the projector, and you can see on the projector, on the screen, it's sort of this faint thing that looks sort of like one of my fingerprints. Put up the second chart, and now you can definitely see my fingerprints on the screen. But the third chart, my fingerprints are all over, what happened. So I practiced the talk before lunch, I practiced the talk after lunch, I practiced the talk after I had snack in the afternoon. I love chocolate. I often 2:30, 3 o'clock, I might have a candy bar. Don't, it wouldn't be past me. And so I practiced that talk with my dirty fingers, and they made marks all over those charts. My boss and the Air Force officers were very nice about it. They laughed, they made a joke out of it, made clear they weren't upset. But I was still pretty embarrassed. I learned not to practice quite as much. And I'm not saying don't practice, but what I found is when you speak and you are true to yourself and you are being authentic and you are sort of speaking in the moment, telling a story versus reading a script, it's very different. I do use and too much because I'm not as practiced as I should be. Maybe you'll hear them now that you pay attention throughout this talk. But I think there's really some value to speaking having people hear, again, that this is coming from you, and it is, you are thinking of it as you are saying it, makes a big difference. The 8 a.m. newspaper break. When I joined that engineering division at Lincoln, as Bob mentioned, someone came to me and said, "Oh, you're going to be working for so and so." I don't know what they do all day. Every day I see them at 8 o'clock. They've got their feet up on their desk. They're just reading the newspaper. They don't work that hard. You're not going to like it there because they're not driven. And I see it, that my boss is there, at 8 a.m. and he's taking a break. He's reading the newspaper. He's having some coffee. But I really like working for him. He's a great boss. I'll talk more about how in a little bit. And then one day I had to come in early. Actually, I was flying to DC, and again, those days, you didn't send things electronically. I had to come to the office to pick up the presentation I was bringing down to DC because it was classified. I couldn't have it at home, could only take it straight there. And so I show up in the office at 6 a.m., and my boss is already there working hard. So what was going on every day? He was showing up well before 6. He was working for 2 hours or so. And then he would take a break, after 2 hours, have a cup of coffee, read the paper, and then get back to work. This other person who, suggested he'd be a bad person to work for completely missed it because this was a great person to work for. He had an incredible skill for empowering the people who worked for him. He didn't tell them what to do. He didn't micromanage them, but he also wasn't absent. They knew that he had their back and they could try things and they could experiment, and he would take responsibility for them and protect them. And people blossomed under his leadership. He had just taken this role over shortly before I got there. There were people, working for him who had sort of been written off by the organization. They weren't that good. And when they started to work for Bill was his name, they just came alive. And I learned a huge amount from that. I've also, at times worked for people who weren't that great. My wife always says, it's not original to her, I think she heard it somewhere, people don't leave bad jobs, people leave bad bosses. And so as you go out there, into the workforce, even to school, I think it is important that you find someone to work for who you trust and you believe in, and steer away from those people who are toxic. They could be brilliant. They could be Nobel Prize winners. They could be bringing in huge amount of money in grants. But if they are not creating an environment where their people thrive, you do not want to work for them. Again, in part, through work my wife does, she sees all the time people who have ended up in working for, principal investigators who don't know how to manage, don't know how to mentor, at best, worst are abusive and take advantage of people. Run away from those opportunities and run to people you can learn from. People sometimes ask me what my management style is. It doesn't come from a book. I don't think it has a name. There are pieces of it that come from Bob. There are pieces of it that come from this guy, Bill, that I work for. I have taken the best. I try to take. I don't think I'm successful at it. I have tried to take the best from everyone I have worked for and bring it together and learn lessons from that. I think you need to go home now. So, I mentioned I'm an Orthodox Jew. Beyond keeping kosher, it also means I don't work on the Sabbath. And Sabbath starts shortly before sundown, Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and it ends shortly after sundown, Saturday night. And in the winter, certainly in Boston, sundown on Fridays can be pretty early. It could be as early as 4 o'clock. Which means if I'm going to make it home before Sabbath starts, and there could be traffic, I need to leave middle of the afternoon. We had this sort of emergency project going on where, again, I'm dating myself a little bit. We got these paper plots about the characteristics of an airplane, and we needed to digitize those plots, put them in electronic form. And I figured out how, with like a mix of scanning the plot and putting it in Adobe Illustrator, we could make that a little bit more mechanized and smooth. But we had, 100 plots to go through. And so it's the afternoon, I'm hard at work, and my boss comes up to me, puts his hand on my shoulder, and says, "I think you need to go home now." And I look at him like, "What are you crazy? We're in the middle of doing this, and am I doing a bad job? What's wrong?" And he goes, "No, it's Friday afternoon. You need to leave." And this is someone who certainly was not religious. I believe he actually thought the fact that I, kept the Sabbath was sort of silly. But he knew it was important to me. And he knew that I would not want to be there if I knew what time it was. Probably, I don't know, 8 years later, 10 years later, I'm a group leader now. I'm actually in the job that he was in. And I actually had someone at the time, my assistant group leader also was an Orthodox Jew, just by chance. And someone comes into the office, wants to speak to me. This other assistant group leader's there, and he says, "I'm a Seventh Day Adventist, which means I don't work on the Sabbath, and I need to leave early on Fridays. I want to make sure that's okay." And I look at him like, "Don't you see me leaving?" And I guess I don't know if he lived further away, or maybe Seventh Day Adventist Sabbath starts a little earlier than Jewish Sabbath. I don't know, but he happened to leave, before I would leave and didn't know it. I actually felt pretty bad that he was uncomfortable coming to me to ask me that. I should have created an environment where he was comfortable doing that. But I think that the main lesson I want to impart is have beliefs, have things that are at your core. I don't mean religious beliefs. For some of you, that may be religious beliefs. For some of you, that might be moral beliefs or political beliefs or, technical beliefs, whatever it is. But there are things that matter to you. There are things that are important to you. Hold to them. Let people know what they are. Don't be embarrassed by them. If people see them and understand it matters to you, all the good people will take that into account and help you to maintain, those beliefs again in whatever form they take. Let me take a break there again. If there's, I'll take a question or two, and then I do have a couple more I want to go through before we stop.
We have some in-person questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for the talk. But my question is, based on your talk about what kind of leader is good to work under, do you have some tips as to how we can achieve to become a leader that's good to work under?
Yeah, how to be a good leader. I think, a couple of things. Again, I think I've learned. Again, empower your people, right? Don't tell them what to do. Tell them what the goals are and let them figure out how to get there. Now, again, different people need different amount of handholding. Someone just graduated from college and starting to work, they will need more handholding. As people get more senior, though, let them go. Show them that you have faith in them. I think, again, creating the kind of environment where people are comfortable speaking up, right? I am a kind of person, I will engage, I will push back, I will ask hard questions, but I have to be careful not to be, overbearing with that, because the goal is for people to ask me hard questions back. And not everyone appreciates that or understands that all the time. So I think creating that environment where people are comfortable having open, honest, but contentious discussions. I'm a big believer in constructive tension. The right amount of tension is a good thing, but you have to be really careful not to take it too far. So at least those are two things. There's other things, but let me stop there.
Thank you
All right,
very
maybe
much.
one more question, and then I'll go on.
Yeah, I know this might not be the point of this lecture, but I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit more about the electric propulsion technologies you work with, like magnetoplasmodynamic thrusters. And my other question was, have you also worked with electroaerodynamic thrusters?
Yeah, so I have not done anything with electric propulsion since I left graduate school. So I've not done anything with electrothermal or electro-air propulsion. Magnetoplasmodynamic, basically, you put a magnetic field around the nozzle. You ionize and create a plasma, with the right kinds of gas going into, and you're essentially trying to accelerate the plasma via via the interaction of those magnetic fields with the ions in the plasma. And you're stretching my knowledge. Again, this was 30 years ago, and I've not touched it since. The challenge with it is the high power needed to do all of that, right? To create the plasma in the first place, to maintain the magnetic fields. It's efficient at large scale. It is not efficient at smaller scale, which is why it hasn't, never really took off. All right, I'll just go through the last three lessons, and then I'll try and do that quickly, leave time for questions. I heard some news about your homeland. We're doing an offsite for my leadership team. So these are all people who work for me. And someone comes up to me and says, I heard some news about your homeland. I hope you're doing well. They had good intentions. They did not mean any harm. But I look at them, I'm like, I'm a US citizen. I was born in the United States. My parents were born in the United States. Half my grandparents were born in the United States. What homeland are you talking about? And so they were talking about Israel. Israel had been in the news, I guess, that morning, that day. And again, I think they meant it in the nicest way, but it made me feel different than other. Again, I keep kosher. People go out to eat. I can go with them. I can't eat. Can't tell you how many times even people who know me well tell me about this great restaurant they were at, and I should go there when I go to such and such a. I'm like, I'm always torn between, do I tell them I can't eat there, or do I just agree and let it go? I'm a leader. I am secure in my career. None of this is actually going to harm me or hurt me. But even for me, it takes me away from my work. I don't quite make the contributions I can when I think about these things. For people earlier in their career, for people establishing themselves in a role, if you make them feel like they are not accepted, not welcome, just different, imagine the impact that that has. Now, again, huge burden on me as a leader. I can do a lot to create an environment. Even each of you, where you are at this point in your schooling and your careers, you do have a role here as well. You are interacting with other people all the time. How you treat them, how you show that you are open, to people of all genders, all races, men and women, whatever gender or gender orientation, incredibly important. I mean, I know diversity and inclusion has become a political term, and we talk about strength through unity, which I think is great. Versus, I don't care about the labels. Put the labels aside. What matters is, do you evaluate people based on their ability to contribute to your project or to your work, or do you look at them in any other way? We need to look at them for what they bring to the work. I think it's just a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. More important, or maybe as important, I don't know, more important or less important, if people don't feel like they're part of the team and don't feel like they can't bring their best to work, you won't get the best out of them. And then in my field, in national security, we can only hire US citizens. We can only hire people who have, clean records. If we also don't hire people because of their ethnicity, their race, their gender, whatever, we won't have the people we need to do the work, and we need the best people possible. So I think it's incredibly important that all of us, take that approach and treat people and assess people and decide who we're going to work with only based on the criteria that really matter, not all of these other things which aren't really important to what we do. I think one of the most satisfying experiences in my career. So when I was a staff member in a group with Bob, big event of the year, we had a conference every year in May, and you worked to get one of your briefings into that conference. That was like a sign of success. You got to give a briefing. One year, I actually got to give 3 briefings, in part because someone was sick. I hadn't really done that work, and I was like, oh, I'm doing great here. I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years later, I'm sitting at that conference and I'm not giving a talk, but I am watching 10 people get up to give talks. Some of them I hired, some of them I picked the topics for their talk or helped create the topics for the talk. Many of them I had worked with them on their briefings, I helped make them better. That was, I realized, like, I can do a certain amount of work myself. I can help 10 people do way more work than I could ever do myself. And that was incredibly rewarding. it's probably only about 4 years ago now. So maybe 20 years, 25 years after the first time I gave a presentation at that conference. I go back to the conference. I'm not even working at Lincoln anymore. And I watched someone who I had hired and mentored be the person who helped other people with their talks and briefings. I walked out of there like on cloud nine. I was so happy and so excited. It was so fulfilling to see, like, I'll be geeky, how your lever arm can grow over the course of your career. And again, you all are not, probably not there yet, but hopefully you all get there to, you know, you're not just doing your own work, you are empowering others and helping them to do their work. One last lesson I wanted to cover. It's not the 10th, right? Obviously, I've jumped, I've broken the pattern, in part because, look, I think, top 10 lists are great, rules are great, they're good to have, but there's times you need to go beyond them. I don't know how many people have watched the movie Airplane. If I signed a bunch of forms before I came to give this lesson, so I would not advocate that any of you go watch an R-rated movie. And if it's Airplane is probably also a little dated. I'm not sure the jokes all still work, or we would all take them as acceptable today. But I recently, about a year ago now, read a book by the directors of Airplane, and they have their rules for directing, one of which is there are no rules. And then one of them tells a story. I think he actually told it at a college graduation, and then brought it up in the book about Mrs. Zubatsky's laws. So as two of the directors are growing up, they're brothers, they live in a house, and they watch, and there's a fire in the house next to them, and the fire engines pull up, and the firemen are working to extend the ladder, and it's taking time to get the ladder up, to essentially the porch where this fire is happening. And Mrs. Zubatsky comes out on her porch and she yells at them, "You idiots, don't bother with the ladder, just point the hose up and put the fire out." And they did it and it worked. So look, I'm 30 years or so into my career. I'm not an expert, but I have some expertise. All of these laws and lessons I've given you, they're good starting points, but some point you have to say, hey, I'm here, I'm in the moment, I know more than that person did, I'm going to do what I think is right. And don't worry about the rules, don't worry about what you heard from me, do what you think makes sense. You're there, you see it, go for it. And with that, I'll pause here. Happy to take other questions for the remainder of the time.
So we actually have an anonymous question online, so I'll just read that out to you. This participant is asking, is it ever too late to find what you love to do? What's your advice for the people who feel like they have to continue with a certain field of work because of the sheer amount of time that they spent working towards it?
Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit before. I feel lucky in that I found what I was excited by relatively early in my career. But again, I talked about my experience in graduate school. So I'm a graduate student. I've spent 5 years. It'll be my 6th year working on my PhD. I went into it always assuming, not even having thought about it, I would be a professor at a university. And then I went to that conference and in part realized, hey, this is not for me. I don't want to do this. I want to get out there. And I switched. Again, I loved what I did at Lincoln. At some point, I looked up and said, the growth I need will be elsewhere. And I left. And same thing at Minor. I left and I joined the government. I don't think it's ever too late, right? I think especially, look, where all of you are in your careers, it is definitely not too late. I would say even where I am in my career, it is not too late. So, don't do it lightly. Don't be on that brownie motion path, but there's always time to learn new things and to start afresh.
Thank you. And then we'll have Enzo.
Yeah, so your presentation was super interesting. I think the biggest takeaway for me, at least, or at least something I wanted to pick your brain about, was you go through all these different experiences and you take away these like super good lessons. And I think a lot of people go through very interesting experiences as well, but have mediocre to no takeaways. Like I don't know if everyone who gets chocolate stains on their presentation is like, let's learn something from that. So while I do love the takeaways that you shared with us, I actually sort of am curious, what's your reflective process like to get from that experience to that lesson? Like what kinds of questions do you ask yourself? What's like the process? What's the format of it?
Yeah. So look, when I left Washington, D.C. that day, I was not reflecting back on the lessons learned from that. I was embarrassed and, I wouldn't say mortified, but I felt bad. It takes time, right? I mean, look, I'm looking back at my career over a long time. It's much easier to reflect at this point. I would say, I think many of those lessons that I learned, I didn't even realize I was learning them at the time. It's good to do something hard. You absorb it slowly as you do those things. And I don't know that I could have put a label on them until well after they happened. I'd say the one thing I would say is, some of these things, they just feel right afterwards. Again, maybe not quite in words, but you have a sense, oh, this was the right decision. Why was it so? I think that's sort of the moment when some of it starts to click.
For time reasons, we're going to do one last question in person.
Hello. So my question was, you know how you mentioned earlier that you should always try and there's gonna be times you have challenges, and you should always pick the challenge. But sometimes you're too stressed. Like, how do you discover what's your limit point? How do you discover your limit?
Yeah. How do you discover your limit? Again, I don't think I should, jump ship and be an artist. I'm terrible at drawing, right? There are things you will never be able to do or be successful at. I think what I look for is the things that make me nervous. Like, I don't know if I could do that. I also don't know if I can. That's, I think, sort of the sweet spot is I'm going to show up there and I think it might work out, but I might bomb. That I think is sort of what you're looking for. I know that's not a very scientific measure, but I've got great ideas. I think I could do this and this. I don't know if that's going to work. I think those are the kinds of things you look for.
Thank you. Right now, we're going to welcome up our virtual t-shirt presenters from the Quantum Software course.
Hello, my name is Rashab Nanduri, and I'm from the Quantum Software course.
I'm Alice, and I also do quantum software. We want to say thank you. We loved your presentation. I thought there were really nice insights to hear, especially as a rising senior. Well, Rishab's a sophomore, but as a rising senior, trying to kind of figure out where we're going to apply, what we want to do. I think it was really nice to hear, just because of the process that we're going through right now.
Yeah, and I was really intrigued by your third lesson and a lot of the points you made about how you can really get a lot of powerful intrinsic value from the impact that your work actually has on the world. And really quickly, we just wanted to say thank you by providing you and presenting you with this BWSI t-shirt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And shout out to
Thank you. Thanks everyone for taking the time today. Yeah.
Ellie, quantum software is
Can the room quiet down, please?
Up by MITRE staff. So
Yeah.
that's right.
Yes, I think I knew that. I knew in the past it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're all set. We're going to do some announcements, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Ellie.